Selmo shaved his master's head as best he could in the near darkness, with only the oil providing lubrication. By doing so, he revealed a dozen intricate golden discs implanted in the back of the old man's skull. "What are these, Master? I've never seen them before." "You haven't seen many things, my boy. Now hand me back the razor." The druid stood up and quickly slit the boy's throat. With hardly a sound, Selmo fell back near the circular design at the center of the depression. Blood gushing from his neck gathered in a big pool and seeped into the carvings. The old man briefly reflected on the years he had spent teaching the orphan boy, and he felt a sudden sadness and guilt. Selmo wasn't the greatest of apprentices, nor the brightest, but he certainly didn't deserve an end like this. Lying in a pool of his own blood, with an expression of pain and surprise frozen on his young face. But such were the rules of this place. An audience with the entity dwelling here required a terrible sacrifice. The priest would have gladly taken Selmo's place, but he was the only one able to do what would follow. He knelt back down next to Selmo's body. He closed his eyes and started to pray. It was a prayer without words. He projected the feeling of injustice done to his people by the Wellers. He recalled the decades of living under their yoke. Foreigners from the bottom of the gravity well, sucking the lifeblood of his spacer kin. He radiated lust for vengeance, animalistic rage, profound sadness, and strength of conviction. "Put down your false teachings before it is too late." At that, the primitives leapt at Brochfail, but they were halted dead, falling to the grass with arrows in their chests, shot from the crowd. A loud gasp went through the throng of druids as one of them threw off their robes to reveal a blonde-haired warrior, nearly naked save for a bow. "Kale, find!" he called to the girl, and she opened her eyes. "Aben, brother!" she called, her voice cracking with hope. Aben began raining a hail of arrows into the crowd, lodging them into the eyes, mouths, shoulders, and hearts of the hapless, panicked druids. Only Brother Maglakunos stood unmoved, unflinching, and across from him Brother Brochfail stared back at him darkly. "It's too late, Brochfail," Maglakunos said, smiling sardonically. "This is the very blood required to welcome Astasoth. Astasoth, the sower and the reaper, the fisher of souls, freed at last from his space tomb. You can do nothing now, Brochfail." It was then that it appeared. Between the two tallest stone pillars, concentric circles of light formed, and a black wind rose, harsh and foreboding, as the circles grew. "Stop!" Brochfail yelled to Aban, who continued to fell druids who died in great numbers, spattering the green grass and stone altars with dark blood. But Aban only stopped when he ran out of arrows and ran to aid his trapped sister. Maglakunos stood before the light portal. As it grew, his arms outstretched, the black wind blowing through his robes. "Astasoth, Reaver, Horned One, Master of the Star Harvest, Time Lord of Tekduin, your servant Maglakunos stands to receive you upon this plain of blood." Maglakunos' eyes were mad. Brochfail stumbled backwards in the black wind and fell on the grass. From the concentric circles, a shape was slowly forming, emerging. It was enormous. Twin stag antlers of unbelievable size began to solidify as Astasoth began to manifest before them. He was vaguely man-shaped, ogreish, dark and shaggy. His legs and torso seemed tied all about in wrapping, like an Eastern mummy. His hands were mighty, misshapen claws. No sooner had he appeared than he grabbed up a dead druid in either hand and shoved these into some mighty maw in his unseen black face, from which glowed red eyes beneath his massive antlers. The bodies were bitten into with a loud and sickening crunch, and Maglakunos laughed maniacally. Evan was in a busy street and had an uneasy feeling. He was on his way to meet Claire on his lunch break. He took a moment to look behind him, into the crowd. The briefest moment. That was the beginning. He was there. Evan did not really see anything distinct, but just noticed a man dressed all in black cloak and fedora in an old-fashioned style. But more remarkably, his face seemed to be all black, as if he was cast completely in shadow, when no one else was. He had a feeling like the man was looking at him, or wished to be noticed. Then he lost sight of him. Stephen Aldridge drew the white Ford Cortina to a halt in front of the old rectory and pulled the handbrake up. He reached over and turned off the 8-track player. As Ozzy Osbourne's wailing vocals faded away, he looked up at the old pile. The view now distorted and refracted by the rivulets of rain running down the windscreen, he thought bitterly. Sighing, he glanced at the overgrown jungle that had once been a substantial garden. Uncle Andrew had clearly not had green fingers. Even the gravel was full of weeds that had spread like a verdant rash, infesting every open space in the shady light of the hoary elms that encircled the house. He climbed out of the car and, despite the rain, paused for a moment, his hands on his hips, staring up at the place. It was still an imposing house despite its neglected air. There were no humans out on the street, but that was nothing new. Most people were too afraid to go outside after sundown. It was Halloween. Robots passed him on the sidewalk, clanking and grinding. Most of them acted like he wasn't there, but one stopped him. It wore a big jacket and hat like it was a person. It looked like a coat rack on speed.
"Hey man, you trying to get underground?"
it said. Parker shook his head and tried to keep going, but the thing kept at him.
"You looking for girls? I got you there too. We both know pleasure bots do things no flesh woman ever could."
Parker said, "No, I'm good, thanks."
"Who you looking for then?"
"Nobody."
"Man, I ain't trying to hear that nobody, nothing business. You're in our part of town now. You better show some respect before something bad happens to you."
Parker stuck the electro pistol under its chin and pulled the trigger. A soft charging sound, then a click. He backed away as the sparks began to fly. The bot stumbled into the street, then fell on its back. It convulsed for a moment, gears and circuitry making popcorn noises. Then nothing. Mulo went to this door and poked his head into the dark. He saw the sword Theodore had been carrying, stained with black blood, and picked it up. The stairs went down, coated with more blood. It was dark. The castle power had been cut. Somewhere down below in the dark, he could hear insane and wretched choking sounds. Theodore! He closed the door quickly, noting it had no outside lock, as two more attackers ran up the steps ahead of the others, their yellow, wolfish fangs bared as they leapt over Richter's legs. Muller looked quickly to the crate of explosives and grabbed a long-handled steel hand grenade. He used this to wallop the first vampire in the forehead with a satisfying crack, hard enough to send him sprawling. He struck downward with the sword and sliced off the hands of the second vampire, then slammed the thick head of the style hand into his mouth, knocking out some fangs and breaking his jaw as he lodged it. He turned the grenade handle to activate and kicked the Strigoi hard in the chest so that he flew against the turret wall to join his partner. There they writhed momentarily like horrible snakes until the steel hand exploded. Muller covered his head as the blast struck, sending stone and shrapnel everywhere, cutting parts of his arm and face. An entire corner of the turret broke away into the open air, leaving a crater as massive stones crumbled down into the white. Muller had only time to grab another steel hand and open the door. Theodore was ascending the stairs, matted and red with blood. "God be with you. God save us all," Muller cried and threw the grenade into Theodore's chest before quickly shutting the door and running. Everything shook with the blast, and the door broke off its ancient Gothic hinges, black smoke billowing out. Despite the evil sounds of the horde of undead still scaling the steps, Muller felt a strange moment of peace then. He calmly walked around the gaping crater and its drop into the white nothingness, and saw another vampire had scaled the stairs. Recognizing an officer's uniform, but not the officer, as the right side of his face was torn away, and his surviving features had become wolfish and acute. But he was tall and formidable, and his surviving eye seemed to glow as he simply stood there, unmoving, a low growl emitting from his throat.